Hello, my beautiful pleasure seekers, and welcome so much to today's episode. I have the wonderful Sara Webb on today's episode, who is a lesbian resilient coach, which I can imagine anyone that's listening to this is like, ooh, tell me more. How did Sara get into this place? So, Sara, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, the pleasure's mine. Thank you for having me.
So this is such a unique title, and I love how creative you already are with this. How did you get into this space and want to help people?
Lesbian heartbreak is different. And heartbreak for me started very early and not in the romantic sense. I had relationships with girls at school and bullies who broke my heart from an early age, picking on all kinds of things. Kids are cruel. But I moved into this space in my 40s. I was a meditation coach focusing on anxiety. And when my ex wife and I split, I used all of my spiritual practices, meditation, subconscious reprogramming tools in order to heal myself from the heartbreak. And when I was getting a divorce, I really looked for somebody like me because as a lesbian, it's one thing to go to a therapist who says that they're an ally, but unless they're in the community, you can see them squirming when you talk about going in between somebody's legs. And so I decided that I was going to shift my business and take my meditation skills and just teach my queer community. So resilience is a skill and meditation is a skill, and these things can be taught because it's this, I call it the itty bitty shitty committee in between our ears that says all kinds of disempowering things. And the reality is, it's based in our childhood programming and disempowering thoughts that we have. So, yeah, that was a long winded answer to your question, but I absolutely love what I do.
Oh no. Well, I mean, go to town with showing whatever. Like, it doesn't matter if it's a long-winded answer or not. So, thank you so much. So I guess you mentioned obviously as a child, like you were obviously always aware that you preferred women, or was that something that took a while to kind of accept in yourself as well?
It definitely was something that I discovered when I went to college at the age of 18, because I grew up very sheltered in the United States. Going to, you can tell by my accent that I grew up in the deep South. So I was in church from Sunday morning, then we would go home, then go back for Sunday night. And I was there on Wednesday night for a youth group. And then I would also go to school there. So I was heavily indoctrinated that homosexuality was bad, bad, bad. You never do it. And it wasn't until I left home that I really discovered the world of women and wine. The first time I kissed a woman, this is not a Katy Perry song, I knew that I was gay, but I called myself bisexual for years, and I dated primarily women in college and thereafter, and then went squarely back into the closet because I really wanted to have a baby, and I knew that my parents would never, I never came out of the closet when I was in my 20s. And then married my ex-husband. I sometimes call him a sperm donor, and the father of my biological child. And then when I started coming out of the closet and realizing that I was using alcohol in order to be able to have sex with my ex-husband, it
Mm.
was a real big spiritual awakening. And I really started to come into my own and really just made a conscious decision to show my daughter what an independent and empowered woman does in this day and age. So
Which is
yeah,
so important.
I didn't know initially, but I think that's just the indoctrination that I had.
And then I guess so, like, did your ex-husband, did he kind of know and there was no surprise, or was it really challenging, like, coming out to him as well?
I actually didn't deliver that blow as well when I told him I wanted a divorce. The D word was enough of a blow. I came out gradually to friends and family, and then finally publicly several years later when I actually came out online. So he probably found out on Facebook that I was gay, or maybe from some friends. We have a good working relationship. We co-parent, but we're certainly not chummy anymore. And I wish we were. I wish we were closer, but and I can understand why he's not really wanting to be best friends with me, because I'm sure I broke his heart. And to be honest, it broke my heart in a lot of ways to divorce the father of my child. And there are so many promises, unspoken promises, explicit promises that we make when we get into a relationship. And those are just words. And then each person who's receiving those words has a set of data that corresponds to those words. And we take that to mean certain things according
Mm.
to our experiences. So a lot of the work I do is unraveling those promises that we made to one another and that we inhaled into our bodies as this is the love of my life. This is forever till death do we part kind of thing. We have to consciously shine a light on those things that we need to dismantle lovingly and intentionally. Otherwise, we'll get into another relationship and still have these, we'll still feel like we're bound to these promises that we made, even though we're actually divorced.
That's huge. Like, how did you realize that pattern of like the promises? Because what else we don't know, right? We don't know any other way. Like you said, you were brought up in a church environment. Like, how did you realize like this isn't who I am? This isn't.
That first time I kissed a girl, I was like, this is definitely it. And then I started having relationships with women thereafter. I was in love with my best friend, did not realize that until decades later. We fantasize, maybe not in a sexual way, at least maybe not in a way where we're admitting what's going on between our ears. But then later, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's why I was so, because when she had to move away, it was heartbreaking for me that she had to move so far away. And when you start to look at it, most of our life is run by our subconscious. Most of
Mhm.
the data that our brains and bodies are receiving is processed by the subconscious. And unless we know how to look, because habits run our lives,
Mhm.
and things start with a thought, thoughts done repeatedly become actions. Thoughts become actions, actions done repeatedly become habits, and habits create the character. But what's driving the thoughts are our underlying core beliefs about ourselves, which 9 times out of 10 are pretty disempowering. Like, nobody likes me, or I'm afraid, or I'm alone, or I'm going to be rejected. And these are based off of traumatic experiences. Maybe it's a big T trauma. Maybe it's just repeated little T trauma that occurred while we were in childhood when we didn't have a prefrontal cortex. This front part on our forehead here is our prefrontal cortex, the brain's CEO, that is logically running everything. But when we go into a state of fight or flight or stress, we go immediately into the limbic brain, and everything is about self preservation. Well, when we have traumatic experiences in childhood and even afterwards, our subconscious stores those memories and makes sure that it's keeping us safe as we
Mhm.
move forward in life. So we get triggered by something that feels unsafe and
Mhm.
triggers these core wounds, and then we act in a way that maybe we regret later, like running or yelling, or we feel defensive in some way because it's similar to a big T trauma or a little T trauma where we were abandoned. Maybe it was even not true abandonment, but our parents were sleep training us. And so we were left in our crib alone. And so we have this abandonment wound that's really, we weren't actually abandoned. We were very well cared for, but we didn't have the cognitive abilities as children to be able to understand why mom and
Mhm.
dad were quote unquote abandoning us. And then we end up choosing partners later on in life who mimic that primary caregiver, parent-child relationship. And even though it's maybe not the relationship that we want, it's subconsciously feeding our subconscious notions about what love is. Like if we grew up and our parents were fighting a lot in the house and then they got divorced, we might come away with a belief that everyone leaves or that love means arguing. And then we energetically and vibrationally attract that kind of partner. So I believe you had a question about how I discovered all this, not only about being gay, but in the aftermath of my divorce, I started doing research because I am not a scientist. I'm a nerd and I love to read and study and take courses and get certifications. And I discovered that attachment is something that was driving the way that I was stepping into relationships. And I decided to start to heal myself of that really intentionally using the power, the magic of meditation. Because when we're 0 to 7, we're actually in a meditative state. We're taking in everything as fact. And that's how it gets rooted into our subconscious.
But I guess like a lot of people talk about like going in the subconscious, and I know how to do hypnotherapy and things like that. But for someone listening right now, they're like, what? Like, where do I even start? Like, how do I even start to tap into my subconscious? I'm noticing patterns, dating the same people. I don't know what my core wounds are. I'm not broken. No one's broken. But like, I want to make a change. I want to date different people. Like,
Yeah.
where would they start?
I love how you touched on hypnotherapy because hypnotherapy and meditation accesses the same brainwave states where we're highly suggestible. So the place to start is in the conscious mind, and a quick Google search or a chat GPT prompt can render the handful plus 15, 20 primary core wounds, some of which I mentioned here. And just reading them, we can start to think, oh yeah, I kind of resonate more with that one. Or I've had clients who come to me and they're like, all of those things. I think all of those things about myself. And I'm like, okay, let's pick 2 or 3 that really resonate the most. And then you start asking yourself how I'm making these situations in my life mean that. So whenever we are afraid to apply for the job or feel like if we go to that networking event, no one's going to like us, then we start asking ourselves, what is holding me back here? And what am I making it mean? What am I making it mean that my coworker doesn't invite me to lunch? And it can be the same action. And in 5 different clients, that produces 5 different disempowering core beliefs based off of our programming. And so the place to start is just by figuring out what are my core wounds, and then what are the emotions that are driving it? And then how can I consciously reprogram the subconscious? And that work is a day by day iterative process by finding the opposite of what the core wound is, putting it in the present positive tense. Maybe you say it to yourself in the mirror. Maybe you listen to a recording of yourself before and after sleep or before and after meditation when we're in that really impressionable alpha or theta brainwave state. And then we look for evidence. And this doesn't happen overnight. When I work with clients one-on-one, my program says it's 9 weeks. Sometimes we do it in 7 or 8 weeks. And my group programs are around 8 weeks long as well. And it really puts people on that path. Maybe they're not 100% healed. A lot of clients do. Within 3 weeks, they're like, I'm not even thinking about her anymore. I am like pouring into myself, because we start with, who are you? What are your values? What's the goal that you have for the end of this program? And then we marry that into a PEP, a personal empowerment phrase that then they can like tape on their mirror or put up onto their computer monitor. And then again, you're looking for evidence that these things, that this new statement is actually true. This is enacting the reticular activating system, the RAS in the brain. The reticular activating system is what helps us to filter the millions of bits of data per second that are available to us. And so, for example, if I told you, look around your space and find everything that's a square, or find everything that is shiny, your reticular activating system would help you look for that. And so in yoga, we say where focus goes, energy flows. So
Totally,
whatever
yeah.
you're focusing on is what you're going to see more of. Just like when you're trying to buy a new car, you start to see all red cars or all
Mm.
Teslas or whatever kind of car you're looking for. And that's how you train your reticular activating system, because it's really non-biased. It looks for whatever you're telling it to look for, and then you use this knowledge that we have from neuroscience about our brains, and we just leverage it to our advantage to change the way that we experience our lives.
And I'm also like super curious as well. So I love men. I'm very kind of like straight through and through. And
Me too.
I appreciate beautiful women. Like I just love females. I'm curious, like, because you've been in two different worlds, quite literally, like, what is it like dating a woman? And I know it's obviously like everyone's got their own experience, there are differences, but like, what is it that you really love about being with another woman?
Oh gosh, everything. But I'll give you some of the science, and I'll also give you some of my personal experience.
Okay.
I find that from the men that I've dated and the women that I've dated, women are just so much more understanding
Mm-hmm.
of, for example, why you don't want to shave your legs every single day. And they're so much more accepting of you without makeup. Or, I mean, there are some men who are like, "Oh, I love you with no makeup and a ball cap," but there are other men who like really like you all dressed up and kind of like the pretty little package, the little Stepford wife, like a little robot. And I don't know, maybe that was my personal experience, but I just find women to be so much more understanding, and especially when it comes to pleasure,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that it doesn't have to be the same every single time. And there's a lot more fluidity when it comes to that time of the month. There's just a lot more understanding there, because men can sometimes be difficult around that time of the month because they don't really understand. But biologically speaking, women are prone to nesting, or I should be more inclusive. People who have more estrogen are nesters, whereas people who have more testosterone are more about spreading their seed. So there's a joke in the gay community, that LGBTQIA plus community. What do gay men bring on a second date? There is no second date. What do lesbians bring? A U-Haul. And this is
Oh,
so gay
because they're
men are they're spreading the seed and women are nesting. And so we get
right.
into
Yeah, yeah,
relationship really quickly. I was engaged after 3 months, married after 6 with
yeah.
my
Mm.
ex-wife. And unfortunately, it fell apart. But this is very common. The U-Haul joke is ubiquitous. Everybody knows what it means. And then sometimes we got to help her load the U-Haul to move all of her stuff out. And unfortunately, no matter your demographic, some women end up homeless because they've moved into the other woman's house, or and the other woman owned the house and they've left their lease behind. So then they're couch surfing, essentially homeless, just because the relationship ended. So
Mm.
yeah, I love having a relationship with a woman on so many different levels. It is definitely more supportive in so many ways. And that's what makes heartbreak so different and so difficult, because we rely on our partner for everything. They're our best friend and our confidant, and sometimes our business partner. So there's so much to untangle and extract. And when we pick up the pieces, sometimes, especially in our culture, people don't understand, and they use these horrible maxims like, there's plenty of fish in the sea, and like the best way to
Um,
get over the best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody, which is like, it's not gonna heal your heart. It's gonna distract you for a little while, but it's certainly probably gonna put you in another same or similar situation with same or similar
mhm.
heartbreak, unless we actually heal those attachment wounds that we got in childhood.
And I guess, like, do you notice then, like, a pattern between women that date other women? Because I from what like isn't like there's been potential issues with father wounds in the past, to kind of like influence this kind of vibes? Or do you believe that men and women are born, they like the other gender, or they're queer, they're bi, whatever? Do you believe it's from birth, or do you believe it comes from like being nurtured?
I mean,
Mm.
I guess everybody needs to answer that
Yeah.
question. Some people do have sexual trauma, but I've, they've done studies with genetically identical twins.
Mm.
And so the nature is the same and the nurture is the same. In
Yeah.
most cases, because they're actually in the same household, growing up at the same time with the same amount of money, same parents, same food, and and so it's clearly an innate or soul level. I mean, we don't know, but it seems to be a natural proclivity that we're born with that has nothing to do with nature or nurture. It's a preference. Like,
Yeah.
I don't like pineapple, or I mean, I do like pineapple, but like, our taste buds can be genetically the same, but we still have different preferences.
Totally. Yeah, my brother's gay. This always fascinates me. And then he was like, I was gay from the day I was born, and I was like, yeah, I as your big sister, like I dressed you up and played dollies with you when you were born, and I wanted a sister, so I kind of manifested a sister, but just in a different way. And he believes the same, like similar value, like believes to you. Like he went and studied biology at uni before he came out, so he could understand if he was broken or not, which still makes me feel so like, oh. But now he's like in a happy marriage. But it always fascinates me, how different people feel and believe, like how they came into these relationships in their lives. It's really, really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. I so my brother's gay and he's younger than
Ah.
me. And then my sister actually came out as gay initially when she went to college and shaved her head. And then she has now gone back. I don't know if she's decided that she's straight or what happened, but she married a man. She married her best friend, and they have 3 children. And they've been married for 15 years. So I,
Oh.
I guess that there might be a genetic component in my family. But I mean, I did have sexual trauma early on, and I had sexual trauma in my 20s as well. But I was gay before any of that in my 20s happened. And it didn't prompt me to come out of the closet at that point. I just repressed it and didn't deal with it at all when I was raped. So it's not like that really fed into anything directly, at least contemporaneously with the actual event.
Wow. And I guess, well, firstly, thank you for sharing. Like, that's such a like personal part of your life. And I guess like,
I wrote a book about it, so I guess
I
it's
know
not.
we're gonna lead on to that. But like, how did you start to feel safe in your body after that? Because for women, that's in general, that's huge. Safety in the body is like, I feel, is a common feeling for women. Like, how did you manage to like really rewire that part? Because that's just a whole different massive thing to fry, like that's huge.
One of the components of the subconscious is that it represses memories that we are not prepared to deal with.
Mm.
My subconscious did a fantastic job and just
Oh.
shoved that down. I told my sister, she said, you should really go to the police, because it was a lot of men and I was drugged and I couldn't do anything about it, and had wisps of memories. They really beat me up. Like, it was both holes. It was traumatic, but I
Mm.
completely repressed it. I didn't deal with any of it. I didn't get help. But then when I started meditating 7 years later, it started coming up, and
Mm.
it wasn't like a huge flood of trauma, but I was aware that I had been repressing it. So I actually leveraged my meditative practices and would go in and kind of sit with a question and think, who have I talked to before that's dealt with sexual trauma, and who could I reach out to in my network, or somebody from high school on Facebook that I've seen as a hypnotherapist, and that's how I started pursuing my own journey of healing, in answer to your question, to be able to feel safe in my body. And it in 2019, I came out, I got sober, I got a divorce. It was a really pivotal year. And yeah, it was difficult. And it's the reason why I'm able to say things like, yeah, I was raped, because I really did the work around it and have forgiven these men completely, because me harboring anger and resentment is only hurting my body. Chances are they're not thinking about it. So why would I torture myself? Why wouldn't I choose to liberate myself and forgive? Because forgiveness is not for them, it's for us,
Mhm.
it's for ourselves. So the work is iterative, it doesn't happen all at once. We do it day by day. And then sometimes things come up again and we get triggered, and then we know the process and we know how to release it again.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Like, I think the amount of strength that you have to hold yourself in just such a unthinkable event and to come out the other side, like really embodying who you are and owning it is just so commemorable. So yeah, that's just so inspiring. Yeah.
So resilience coach makes more sense now. I'm a lesbian and a resilience
No,
coach.
it does. Yeah, totally. And I guess like for, for you then you just shared like you wrote a book as well around, so you've like publicly published quite literally like books. In the book, like what do you share? Like how does that there we
It's
go.
an it's an artful piece. This is a collection
Gosh.
of 55 original poems. The first
Oh.
part of the book is Look, and the second part is Lush, because that's about, I mean, there's some sensual poems in there, if you will,
Mm.
but getting sober is part of this as well. It's all part of the journey. I'm writing a second book, which will not be poetry. It will be prose, and it is entitled Queer Hearts Break Harder. I just believe that in our community, because either we're in the closet and we're suffering, or we're out of the closet. And chances are we're suffering because someone is rejecting us. And for my family of origin, my siblings accept me, but my birth parents just, while we were estranged for a little while, I have decided to reconcile with them. And if I mention anything about my business or my sexuality, they promptly change the subject and act like I've said nothing.
How does that make you feel?
Well, it's their own denial of themselves, because if anyone is unable to accept something about someone else, imagine what it's like inside their own head. They have, they are torturing themselves, terrorizing themselves for their mistakes. And I have made a conscious choice to love every single part of myself. I noticed in 2019 that I would pass a mirror and have a horrible thought that had, I don't even say the H word anymore. I would say, I hate you. And that was a result of me living in the closet, not stepping into my authenticity. So I started doing mirror work and utilizing that tool to look at myself in the eyes and basically lie to myself and say things that I wanted to hear inside of my head. That's that subconscious reprogramming. And that's the reticular activating system turning on and looking for things in the environment that actually reinforces that. I woke up a year ago and I noticed, I said, I love you, Sarah, to myself in my head. So it takes some time, but it's so worth it. And it actually takes less time to reprogram than it did when we spent all that time in that really dark space, the programmed space that happened during childhood or middle school. Gosh, middle school. I don't know what you call it in England or in Australia, but that when people are going through puberty, it's so hard. Kids are so cruel. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so
cruel.
I talked to my daughter about not taking negative things that other people say to her and repeating
Mm.
them to herself inside of her head. I say kind things to yourself inside your head, because the reality is we're programming our children whether we like it or not. So
Yeah.
I talked to her about her body is her body, and she gets to decide, even if she gave somebody a hug the time before, she can choose if she wants to give them a hug again. And if they don't stop, ask them to stop. And if they don't stop, then you change that situation, get out of there or get them out of there. When she was really little, I used to say, you kick them and run away, because that was what a 3-year-old could do, right?
Yeah.
Now that she's bigger, I'm really programming her for her teen years. You know?
She's like kicking and running away from people. You're like, I don't know where that came from. Like, I'm not quite sure. So, but I really feel like the next generations of children like are going to be these just like magical unicorns
Mhm.
from how they've been raised. And I'm sure there's going to be a whole new level of trauma or whatever that they will have like created from whole new things that we're like, oh. But yeah, I get it. I have a friend's daughter, and I had the same conversation with her. She was 4. She didn't want to give me a hug, and I was like, she looked really embarrassed, and I was like, no, 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 like good for you, like that's fine. And when they just look a bit confused, they're like, oh, okay, I can honor that. That's kind of cool. So
That's
yeah, and especially
beautiful.
with little girls as well, it's super important for
I
the
know.
people pleasing and saying
Mhm.
yes and the good girl mentality and
Mhm.
playing small. Oh,
You nailed it. We are grooming them in a really disempowering way. Like, grandpa wants a hug. Well, they're uncomfortable with grandpa and they don't want to give grandpa a hug, or whoever it is, this stranger that mom and dad know, but they don't know. And we need
yeah.
to empower children to take ownership for their bodies. And no thank you is a complete sentence.
Absolutely. But then as adults also, I don't know about you, but if someone gives you a hug and you don't know them, you almost feel obliged to sometimes
Right.
hug them back, right? And I've started being like, I'm actually a hugger, but like if I don't, I'm like, ooh, okay. Like I don't really respect someone that's like, I don't want to. I'm like, great, love that. Like,
Yep.
cool. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I'm very big into sovereignty too. I ask, are you open to a hug? Because
Yes,
I'm a
I do
hugger.
too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I'm a
great.
hugger.
Unless I'm dating them and I'm with them, obviously I'm kind of like
Yes, yes. Is
it's
that your
not.
love language? Do you need that physical touch?
Yes, immensely. Physical touch and well, actually I did the quiz recently with he's now my ex, but I came up like equally in most of them, but physical touch and quality time are like my strongest, and my least one is gifts, just because I kind of buy everything for myself that I
Yeah.
want. Yeah. But if it's something sentimental, I love that. Like it could be like the
Yes.
smallest little random thing. I'm like,
Yes.
ooh.
Yes.
Um, so
That's
yeah.
very
What about you?
thoughtful.
Yeah.
I'm super high maintenance. I need all of them. I'm kind of like you, like equal in everything. And
Mhm.
I love words of affirmation and physical
Mhm.
touch is, and maybe physical touch isn't the highest, and maybe that's part of my trauma, but quality time for sure. And I love gifts, especially like you say, they don't need to be expensive, but if they're thoughtful, like somebody noticed, I see that that thing is kind of getting worn down, and then they think to actually buy me a replacement that's so in line with my style, then yeah, that's a really cool, thoughtful gift. It doesn't have to be like an extravagant trip to Bali, which I'm very open to. But yeah, for
You can
sure.
buy me a house, that's fine.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, put the Tesla in the garage too.
But that little thing you saw me like in like a little $1 store was also cute. I guess like for you in the dynamics, do you find in your relationships there's like a very like common role or common sort of like type of person that you're attracted to, or do you find the more work that you do that also varies and changes as well in like in a lesbian relationship?
I am a sapiosexual. So I'm attracted to people's intellect more than their
Oh,
physicality. So if you were to line up all of my exes, you would not find much similarity
I
between.
love that. I
I mean,
can relate to that.
and weights and hair colors and
Mm,
ethnicities. It's really about that intellectual connection. Are they a seeker? Are they a lifelong learner? Can we banter? Do they care about the things that I care about? I think it's more of a, so I can sometimes fall in love with the idea of somebody before ever meeting them, which is pretty common with lesbian relationships, to have a long distance relationship because we're spread out across the country, and then we're on the apps and we open it up to anybody and end up falling in love with somebody who isn't even in our time zone.
oh, yeah,
So,
right.
Yeah. And then you meet them for the first time, you're like, oh my gosh, I thought you were taller.
Oh, wow. I never meet people on dating apps. I always meet them in cafes, gyms, wellness centers, like all through their children, like if they're divorced. Like it's a weird kind of pattern type. I've never heard of sape. Is it what did you say? Sapie?
Sapiosexual.
And what are the other types? Are there other types like this?
I don't know. I think it's just
No.
somebody who's sexually attracted to somebody because of their mind.
Got you. Okay. This makes a
So,
lot of sense.
by the way, that's a hetero luxury to meet people in gyms, and like we just don't
Yeah.
have the mass of
Mhm.
people. I live in St. Petersburg where there are a lot of lesbians here actually.
Oh,
And even then, because of that nurture, like the gay bars are gay boys because they are spreading the seed, right? And whereas the lesbians are at home, lesbian bars shut down because they get together at the bar and then they never come back. So it's really tough to meet people in situ, if you will. So the apps are kind of, if you're looking, you got to be swiping.
and do you ever come across like when you're in situations where you said obviously where you live there is a lot of lesbians like or
Mhm.
kind of bi people, humans, unicorns, whatever you want to term them.
Yes.
Um, are you quite a good judge of character? Like, can you meet someone like, oh, I think she's like she also likes women, or is it quite hard to tell?
Hmm. I think there's a lesbian swag that people have.
Mm,
And we try to avoid the stereotypes, but then we cling to the stereotypes in order to be recognized, especially for somebody who's feminine like
mm.
me. I mean, I have the gay pin, I have the watch band, just to let anybody that's looking for it might know. If you're looking for it, then you might know because
Got you.
it's
Okay.
not always. I've gotten people who say, "What? You're gay? You don't look gay." And I'm like, "What does gay look like? Like,
Oh
what kind of?" But there
no.
is a stereotype, and that's so that we can recognize one another, right?
I love that so beautiful. Oh my goodness. So for anyone that wants to work with you, reach out to you, what magic are you creating and spreading in the world at the moment?
Gosh, I've got a lot of opportunities for connection. You can find me everywhere at Sara Webb Says. That's SarawebBsays. So sarawebsays.com. I'm on Instagram as well as LinkedIn. I'm not so active on there. I started a private lesbians only, well, queer people only, we're very inclusive Facebook group. I started it back in December, and as we record this, there's almost 2,000 women and queer people in it. And so we do free events. I work with people one on one. I also do group coaching. And you can find out more about all the fun that we're having, helping to reprogram that itty bitty shitty committee on all of my platforms.
I love this. Okay, well, I will add everything into the show notes for anyone listening right now is just feeling like confused or just no idea where they're heading to next. Please reach out to Sarah. And Sarah, once again, thank you so much for joining today. I've loved our conversation. It's an absolute pleasure. And it's just so refreshing to hear someone like fully embracing themselves, and living how they want to live. So thank you.
Same here. You're a joy. I so appreciate you.
Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, for anyone listening, thank you so much for listening today. And I will catch up with you all next Wednesday.